Welcome back to Life Stories Network, where every story touches the heart and reminds us of the bonds that truly matter. Tonight, I want to share something deeply personal, an unforgettable evening that began like any other, but ended with a moment that changed how I look at my son, and maybe even myself. So sit with me for a while, because this is not just my story, but a reminder that love often knocks when we least expect it. It was late at night, and the house had fallen silent. The kind of silence you only get when the day has finally run out of noise. I had just finished cleaning up the kitchen, double-checking the doors, and making sure the lights were off downstairs. My body was tired, and honestly, my heart felt heavier than usual. Sometimes, after a long day, you just want to collapse into bed and forget about everything. That was me on this particular night. As I lay down, pulling the blanket over me, I closed my eyes, grateful for the peace of the moment. My thoughts drifted, and I could feel sleep slowly creeping in. But then, just as I was about to surrender to it, I heard a soft knock at my bedroom door. It wasn't loud or rushed. It was hesitant, almost careful, as if the person on the other side wasn't sure if they should disturb me. My first thought was, who could it be this late? I sat up, blinking in the dim glow from the bedside lamp. Come in, I said softly, my voice half asleep but curious. The door creaked open, and to my surprise, it was my son. He stood there in the doorway, his shoulders a little tense, his expression unreadable. I couldn't help but wonder why he was still awake. He usually kept to himself at night, especially after long days of school and his part-time job. Hey, Dad, he whispered, almost as though he didn't want to break the quiet of the room. I gave him a small smile and patted the side of the bed. What's up, son? You should be sleeping. He stepped inside slowly, closing the door behind him, and for a moment, I could see he was carrying something heavy on his heart. It wasn't his posture alone, it was in his eyes, too. Eyes that looked like they had been debating this moment for a while. When he finally sat down at the edge of the bed, I stayed quiet, letting him gather his words. Sometimes silence is the best way to show you're listening. He ran his hand through his hair, the way he always does when he's nervous. Then he finally spoke. Dad, there's something I've been wanting to tell you. I didn't know how to say it, but I couldn't go to sleep tonight without letting you know. I froze for a moment, wondering what kind of news this could be. Was it trouble at school? Something wrong with his job? Or worse, something he had been hiding from me all along? My heart raced as I waited for him to continue. He looked down at his hands, then back at me, and his voice shook just a little when he said, I know I don't say it enough. Maybe I've never really said it the right way, but I need you to know that I'm proud you're my dad. For a second, I couldn't believe what I had just heard. My son, the boy who had grown up right before my eyes, the boy who often seemed too busy or too distracted to say much, was telling me he was proud of me. My throat tightened, and I felt something deep inside me stir. Those words, simple as they were, carried more weight than I could have ever imagined. I reached out and placed my hand gently on his shoulder. Son, do you have any idea what that means to me? I asked softly, trying to hold back the tears that were threatening to escape. He gave me a small nod, his lips pressing into a faint smile, though I could tell he was holding back his own emotions too. There was a quiet moment between us, where nothing needed to be said, because the silence itself was filled with love. But he wasn't done yet. He took a deep breath and said, I've been thinking a lot lately about how hard you've worked for us and how much you've given up. I see it, Dad, even when I don't say anything I notice. And I just didn't want another night to go by without telling you that I'm grateful. Hearing those words broke something open inside me. All the nights I had stayed up worrying about bills, all the mornings I had dragged myself to work even when I was sick, all the sacrifices I thought went unseen, it all came rushing back, but this time, it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like love finally recognized. My son had seen it. He understood. And that was worth more than anything else in the world. I pulled him closer and hugged him tightly, something I hadn't done in a long time. Maybe he had grown too fast, maybe I had let life get in the way, but in that moment, it was just a father holding his son, both of us realizing how much we needed that closeness. I whispered into his ear, "Thank you, son. You don't know how much I needed to hear that tonight." As I held my son close in that quiet room, I realized how long it had been since we had such an honest moment. Life had become a cycle of responsibilities, work, bills, meals, and the endless list of things that never seemed to stop piling up. Somewhere in the middle of it all, the simple things, the hugs, the conversations, the words that mattered, had gotten lost. But here he was, breaking the silence I didn't even know had grown between us, and in that embrace, I felt time slow down. When we finally pulled apart, I could see his eyes shining with unshed tears. He quickly wiped them with the back of his hand, pretending like nothing was wrong, but I knew better. I smiled gently and asked, "What made you decide to say all this tonight?" He hesitated, looking down for a moment before answering. His voice was soft, almost uncertain, but his words hit me like a wave. "Because I don't want to wait until it's too late, Dad. I don't want you to ever doubt how much you mean to me." Those words, they pierced through me in a way I can't explain. I had spent so many nights wondering if I was doing enough, if my son saw me as just a tired man struggling to keep things together, or if he understood the love behind it all. And here he was, telling me exactly what my heart had been aching to hear. I reached out and squeezed his hand firmly, not trusting my voice for a moment. When I finally spoke, my words cracked with emotion. "Son, you've given me the greatest gift tonight. I don't need anything else in this world as long as I know you see me and appreciate me." He gave me a small smile, one of those genuine smiles I hadn't seen in a while, the kind that made me remember the little boy he used to be, the boy who once ran into my arms after school, proud to show me his drawings, the boy who believed I could fix anything with my hands, even when it was just a broken toy. For a second, I saw both versions of him sitting there, the child he was and the young man he was becoming. My heart swelled with both pride and nostalgia. But then he leaned back slightly, his expression turning serious again. "There's something else, Dad," he whispered. My chest tightened. The way he said it made me nervous. I braced myself, unsure of what was coming next. He took a deep breath before continuing. "I've been holding on to a lot of things, feelings I didn't know how to share with you. And tonight, I don't want to keep them bottled up anymore." I nodded slowly, trying to steady myself. "Go ahead, son. Whatever it is, I'm here. You can tell me anything." He hesitated, biting his lip, then finally let it out. "Sometimes I feel like I disappointed you. Like maybe I wasn't the son you hoped for." Those words hit me harder than anything else he could have said. My eyes widened, and I shook my head instantly. "What? No, son. Never. Why would you ever think that?" He looked away, his voice shaky, as he tried to explain. "Because I see how hard you work, how much you sacrifice. And I feel like I haven't done enough to make you proud. I'm not the best at school, I don't always say the right things, and sometimes I think maybe you deserve better than me." Tears filled my eyes, and I couldn't stay seated anymore. I shifted closer to him, placing both hands firmly on his shoulders. "Listen to me carefully," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "You could never disappoint me. You are my son, my flesh and blood. Do you understand that? From the day you were born, you became the greatest blessing of my life. I don't care about grades or mistakes or any of that. What I care about is the man you're becoming, the kindness in your heart, the love you carry. And tonight, sitting here with you, hearing your words, I've never been more proud." For a moment, he just stared at me, his lips trembling as though he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. Then, before I knew it, he leaned into me and hugged me again, this time tighter, stronger, like he was holding on for dear life. I felt his shoulders shake, and I realized he was crying silently against me. My arms wrapped around him instinctively, and I held him close, rocking him gently like I used to when he was small. We stayed like that for what felt like forever. In that moment, nothing else mattered. Not the bills, not the stress, not the worries that usually weighed on me. All that mattered was my son in my arms, finally letting go of the burden he had carried alone. When he finally pulled away, wiping his face, he let out a shaky laugh. "Sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to get so emotional." I shook my head and smiled through my own tears. "Never apologize for showing your heart, son. That's what makes you strong, not weak." He nodded, taking in my words, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were truly seeing each other, not just as father and son, but as two human beings trying to figure out this thing called life. There was no judgment, no distance, just raw honesty and love. It was the kind of moment I knew I would carry with me forever. Then, almost as if he didn't want the night to end on such a heavy note, he grinned a little and said, "You know, I was actually going to just tell you tomorrow morning. But something inside me said, no, it has to be tonight. I guess my heart didn't want to wait." I chuckled softly, shaking my head. "Well, I'm glad it didn't wait. Because tonight, son, you reminded me what really mattered." The room was quiet again, but it wasn't the same silence as before. Earlier, the quiet had felt heavy, almost lonely. Now, it felt full of love, full of honesty, full of the kind of connection that doesn't need words to explain itself. My son sat there beside me, looking lighter somehow, like a burden had finally lifted from his shoulders. And I felt it too, deep inside me, a sense of peace I hadn't known in a long time. I leaned back against the headboard, still holding his hand loosely, and said, "You know, son, when I was your age, I didn't have moments like this with my father. He was a good man, but he wasn't one to share his feelings. And I carried that emptiness for years, wishing he had said the things you said to me tonight. So what you gave me tonight, it's something I'll treasure for the rest of my life." He looked at me thoughtfully, his brow furrowed as if trying to imagine me as a boy with the same hopes and fears he had now. "That's why you're different, Dad," he said softly. "You always tried to be there for me in ways your dad couldn't be for you. And I see that. Even if I don't always say it, I see it." His words struck me with such force that I had to look away for a moment, blinking back tears. "Maybe," I admitted, "but I also made mistakes. There were times I was too tired, too stressed, too caught up in survival to notice the little things. And I regret that sometimes. But hearing you tonight, it tells me maybe I did something right after all." He gave me that boyish grin again, the one that always managed to undo me, and said, "You did more than right, Dad. You gave me everything I needed." His voice cracked on the last word, but he didn't shy away from it. He let the truth sit there between us, raw and real. We talked for hours after that, about things we had never said out loud. He told me about his fears for the future, about how sometimes he felt like he wasn't good enough, and how he worried about letting me down. And I told him about my fears too, that I worried about failing him, about not being the father he deserved, about whether he'd grow up remembering me as someone who tried his best or someone who fell short. It was strange but freeing to admit those things, to confess them openly instead of hiding them under layers of silence. At one point, he asked me a question that stopped me cold. "Dad," he said quietly, "if something ever happened to you, what's the one thing you'd want me to remember?" My heart skipped a beat. The thought of not being there for him was unbearable, but I knew I couldn't brush his question aside. I took a deep breath and answered, "I'd want you to remember that no matter what, You were always enough for me. You were always my pride, my joy, my reason to keep going. Nothing could ever change that." He nodded slowly, his eyes glistening, and whispered, "Then that's what I'll carry with me. Always." It was well past midnight when I finally realized how long we had been talking. The world outside was dark and still, and the clock on the wall ticked softly, reminding us of time slipping by. I nudged him gently and said, "You should get some rest, son. Tomorrow is another long day." He smiled but didn't move right away. Instead, he leaned forward and hugged me once more, whispering, "Good night, Dad. I love you." Those 3 words, so simple yet so powerful, filled the room like a warm light. I whispered back, my voice breaking, "I love you too, son. More than you'll ever know." And with that, he finally stood up, walked to the door, and gave me one last smile before slipping out into the hallway. The soft click of the door closing behind him lingered in my ears, but instead of sadness, it left me with a strange